I think that I spent a large part of my 20s trying to figure out where I was supposed to land. I worked as a social media manager, project manager for a number of years. I ghost wrote content for other people. And then in between that was traveling and trying to find out where I was supposed to be. And so, yeah, it was an interesting time, but a confusing one. Did you feel that way in your 20s?
Yeah, I definitely did. Well, I got married and divorced in my 20s.
I mean, that's how to use a decade.
Yeah, right? It's like I went in and out. It's like so full experience. I always say I went to Harvard for life, which is what that marriage like pivot of my life, because I was 4.5, 5 years, total of 7. So it's like I did my, what is it, your prerequisites? And then I went and graduated.
Then you did your capstone. Yeah, right. You did your undergrad. You did your English and your science.
I graduated with a bachelor's. Didn't make it to a master's degree, but it's okay.
No, but you graduated with honors, I heard. Exactly. So yeah, a little magna cum laude, you know?
So I did that. And I think that for me, I could not relate to 97% of my friends because I never had the college experience. I didn't really care for it because growing up in Miami, you see a lot very early on.
Yeah, I would imagine.
And by the time you're 18, you're like, you either get kind of stuck in that lifestyle or you want to experience the college, which is like a different element of Miami.
Or just something completely different.
Yeah. And when I got the opportunity at 18 to move to LA and start a business and all this stuff, I was like, I'm going to take that route. Yeah. But I didn't realize it was also going to be so career and so much responsibility on myself, like intensively, like millions of dollars and all this stuff where you're just like, where is this going? I remember teaching myself QuickBooks through Google, right? For example, and none of my friends like could relate.
They weren't
to
in that space.
They were like, oh yeah, I have a 25-page paper due. And I was just like, 25-page paper? The last time I wrote that was like my senior year in high school. I can't think of that. But in the same time, I had like $3.5 million worth of investment that somebody's like, okay, so when are we getting our money back? You know? And I'm like,
you're like, it's a coming. Yeah.
So it's like that was very different for me. And I think also like internally, I was a young woman and now I was handling this business without a college degree, trying to continuously tell myself I am worthy to be here and I really can take this role and become something out of it without the school knowledge or the degree to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. But that sounds like a really good time in life to go ahead and deal with that imposter syndrome, right? You know, because it's like you're doing it, you're living it, but then because you've seen the ways that other people land into careers, you're like, now wait, did I skip a step that everybody else is going to come back and go, now where's your piece of paper?
Right.
You know, like I would imagine that absolutely would be something to navigate. But then did you feel like moving out of that time? Because look, navigating that and then, like you've said, the marriage and divorce, like that's so much. That's like, those are 40s problems in my mind. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no, I remember coming out at 25 and being like, I'm a 52-year-old woman with 3 kids, but I actually have no kids and I'm actually 25. Like, did you ever kind of lose sight of your age while ghostwriting for other people and kind of like living your life for others? Because it seemed like that's what you were doing a lot at that time rather than like discovering yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I definitely did. And I think that I spent a lot of time because I think that just a little bit of background. I grew up in Texas and I was plugged in a large church and thought that that's kind of where I was supposed to be, but then would spend my weekends out on the road or would spend a chunk of time and then I'd have to come back. And the truth is that I realized that I was definitely offloading a lot of me figuring out who I was to find myself valuable where I was, if that makes sense. I exchanged, I think, a lot of having to sort out for myself where I wanted to go and who I wanted to be in exchange for, and in part with my upbringing, the noble thing of giving your life to another and laying it down so that you can serve another person. And so that was definitely a part of me, but it also caused me to grow up way quicker than I feel like, not that I was supposed to, but I was at 19 and 20 just because of the way life was. I felt like I was giving counsel to a lot of people who were older than me. And because of the industries where kind of my friends in my life reaches, it was a lot of areas that kind of felt a lot bigger than me. And I felt like it kind of forced me to put on a different mindset where I really didn't have to deal with me, if that makes sense.
No, and I can relate to that a lot too, because I remember having a business in my 20s and people constantly being like, wait, you're only 21, you're only 22, because I seemed so much older. older because I had so much responsibility. So people would come to me a lot for advice as well, and like guidance on even how to lead their companies or what they should do in life. And I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing.
I know. Yeah. You're like, I'm still trying to figure me out. Yeah, of course.
I'm like, I just learned QuickBooks 2 nights ago, and now you're asking me how I should like start a business. We're figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, let's learn together.
And I think there's beauty in that. I have a little sister, and I always tell her she's so dramatic, but then I bring it back to like, wait, I think I was probably dramatic in my own way at that time too.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know, because in that time, you just think, just like in high school, you think the world is crumbling.
Oh, and if this one thing doesn't work out, like, then I have to scrap everything I've ever touched.
Exactly. And I think even more, if I use her as a reference with being in school, she's so studious and so smart. But when something doesn't go her way and she's killed herself studying and all this stuff, she's like, that's it. I'm a failure. And in same but different, I would feel that way at times. You know, like even though I was helping run a company, when something didn't go right, could have been the smallest thing. I was just so hard on myself then to be like, that's it. Like, everybody's going to hate me. This is going to fail. Like, what did I think? So much of the imposter syndrome and like the negative self-talk would happen, where now I'm like, the world isn't ending. Like, it's not that I don't care as much now, but I think now I'm like, okay, this was a bad day. This was a bad moment. This was a bad experience. The world isn't over.
Yeah, well, you take a moment in context of the whole as opposed to like judging the whole by a moment, right? I think that's maturity though too.
Yeah. And also, I think not even just in your 20s, but when you're in it, it's a lot harder unless you train your brain to see outside of it.
Oh, yeah. You can't see the forest from the trees. Yeah. I think that is one of my, in talking to even people in their 20s or younger people. I mean, look, I'm only 34, guys. I'm a spring chicken over here. But what I'm saying is like, there is a real overwhelm, I think, that can happen when you feel as if you're having to respond to everything happening to you and you're just living in that reaction kind of phase. And I think that your 20s are spent reacting because you're also getting on your feet for the first time, right? And so a 60-year-old is going to navigate a problem different than a 17-year-old will, right? And a 17-year-old might be like, the sky is falling right now, but the 62-year-old is like, okay, so actually, the sky isn't falling. It feels like it does. This is just what's happening in this environment. I can separate that from the whole reality. And it's environmental and circumstantial. You had to grow up quicker because of your own reasons. I had to grow up quickly outside of all that I just mentioned for different reasons, right?
Do you think you were mature in certain aspects of you, but really immature still in others, though?
Of course.
Like, what was the
Yeah, I was really, really, really great. People skills, I can handle people. Not to be like, I'm great with everybody, but like I can deal with people and do that well. My insecurity and lack of just being able to be in my skin and not feel like my first objective is making you comfortable with being in my skin. Does that make sense?
So do you think in your 20s you were more of a people pleaser?
Yeah, I definitely was. When I left high school, and I was a theater kid, and when I left high school, it was almost like a dissemination of all of my friend group kind of at that point. And I was really desperate for some friends. And so I immediately found some older friends that were willing to pour into me, like 10 years older. And to this day, one of my very best friends, a guy named Ryan Edgar, came alongside. And it was like, I hadn't spent the time to really be okay with myself. And I had never really felt wholly accepted just as a whole package of Kavanaugh. And when I found people who were willing to be like, oh no, I love you, I felt like I was slowly able to start coming out of my shell and define the things that people would be drawn to about me. But then I really focused on those things. So it'd be like, if I had affirmation from my older friends who I respected, I'm a youngest sibling, so there's also, I think, that at play. But it would be like looking for the affirmation from the people I respected to go, oh, I want to hear what you have to say, Kavanaugh. Okay, so then that makes me really take into account what I'm speaking to and where I'm giving my opinions if you come to respect my opinions, right? Or, oh, Kavanaugh, that was funny. Okay, well, you think that's funny? Well, now I'll show you what's really funny in this area. And
it makes you more comfortable with yourself to be able to show those sides of yourself to other people around you, right?
Yeah, because it's still in my control, right? Which is really, I think, what a lot of comfort is based on is like, what feels like I'm controlling what I'm giving? What feels like it's being taken from me without my consent as a person? There's that exchange. I think that in my 20s, I found what other people could connect with me on. And because as a kid and growing up, I kind of felt felt a little starved for like real heart connection. I was like, oh, I can reach people this way. Amazing. But that kind of put me on the back burner. And then I think I looked up probably around like 28, 29, 30 and was like, oh, I've really offloaded a lot of figuring out who I am to just being present for other people.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Right.
There's some, I think, good things in that. But now I have to take responsibility for like what I want to leave in the world, what I want to pour in. And I feel like it was a different question than I was asking in my 20s. In my 20s, I was like, I've got to get into something. I have to find my calling. And now in my 30s, I'm like, what am I actually called to?
Right.
I don't feel like I have to sort out everything I'm doing. It's like, okay, let's look at life. Let's look at what's in my hands. Let's look at the opportunities in front of me. And then let me decide where I want to steward and invest, right? It's a different thing.
You said something about in your 20s, which reminded me of myself that I recently had a conversation with someone. In my 20s, it was so much of me pouring to people, but pouring from a large pot.
Yeah.
I'm very much a pictures person when I explain things. And in my 20s, I wasn't like, here you go from the cup.
You're like
I
throwing
was like, here you go. And
yeah.
sometimes people would be like, whoa, so much love, so much attention, so much time. Or they would be like, give it to me. That's just how Yanina is. And then I would constantly realize that I would deal with situation of friendships, work, where I would overextend myself so easily without realizing I was doing it in hopes that you can validate me, because I didn't grow up having validation, but I grew up in dance and band, which means when you do good, you win awards.
Right, exactly.
So I did that in my 20s of, okay, I don't have really a huge family support to lean on. I had a partner, then didn't have a partner. So if I just pour from a pot, that means I'm going to receive from a pot, where it was like,
that's
no,
not the way
that's not the way it goes at all. And sometimes it's a little bit repulsive for people to receive. But also that doesn't mean that others give love that way or are going to know how to love you. Because in that, I'm not helping teach people how to love me or how to give me love of service, right? But instead, I'm giving them so much of me that they're having to digest it and be like, do I even want to receive this?
Right. Yeah. And that's a whole
So whether
thing.
it's like leaning on to them for a friendship when they were okay with just being like social buddies, or overextending myself with work and not working hard to prove myself in the company, but working hard to the point that now everyone's giving me their task and now I'm feeling burnt out.
Yeah.
I'm feeling not validated because they're just like, Yanina just likes to work. I'm not feeling like anybody values my work because they're like, she just does it all the time. And then in friendships, I'm constantly showing up for people that are not even asking me to show up for them. And then I'm wondering why I feel alone.
Yeah.
And I think that it took the end of my 20s, beginning of my 30s to realize there's this woman, her name is Vernee Myers. She's an amazing woman. She used to be the head of inclusion of Netflix. And she said something in a podcast once, and she reiterates in a personal conversation that she said, all relationships should have reciprocity. And she said, because the reality is just like a bank account, each human has a soul. If you are doing more withdrawals than deposits, or if you are doing more deposits than withdrawals, it's going to eventually be full on that side and empty on this side, or you're going to be negative on this side because you're giving to so many other people and not realizing. And even if you want to fill yourself back up, the reality is human is for connection.
Yeah.
And I remember that it hit, and it was funny because the reason why she told me that is because it was one of my, through divorce jobs, I became her personal assistant when she moved to LA.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I remember the jobs that I did for her were so small to her expand of career that she has, but the amount of knowledge and wisdom that I would learn from her was so valuable to me. So I love that. And now it's not about what can you do for me?
Yeah.
It's more, if you care about me, you're going to make sure that we're both meeting at each other